Alright, I'm going to show you how I make my pizza dough with a sourdough starter. This is my sourdough starter, and I just keep it in the refrigerator. When you see this line of liquid forming on the top of the actual sourdough starter, which is right here below, it means that you can use it or you need to feed it. So it kind of looks gross on the inside with the liquid on top. I just normally discard this. I pour it out. And after I pour it out, you're left with this little mess in there. And before I put that in my dough, I will just give it a bit of a stir so that it's mixed up nicely. And then I let that sit right there. But basic bowl, you take 1 cup of lukewarm water. You can either heat it up in a pot or microwave it for a minute or so. It needs to be a little bit above your body temperature or just about the temperature, so feel it. If it's not scalding hot, it's perfect temperature. I add 1 package of the active dry yeast in that. And we'll just cut that open and sprinkle that right in there. And then you just mix that around just a little bit. And then this is just going to sit until it bubbles a bit, until you do your next step. You just get that mixed up. Get all the yeast back into the water. And you'll just let that sit and do its thing. Alright, so until that magic happens with the dough or the yeast bubbling up in there, we will take a break and come back. Alright, so it's been about a half an hour and I don't have the usual bubbles, probably just because I'm videotaping this that I normally do. But it's okay. I think the water might have been a little bit too cold, or it's just cooler in my house than it normally is. I don't know, but I don't think it's gonna matter. So just mix that up, and then we're gonna add in a tablespoon of sugar. And you can skip that part if you want, but this has been working well for us. And then you put in a tablespoon of salt. I'm using Icelandic salt. If you do decide to do this and you don't have Icelandic salt, which I don't know why you would have it, use a kosher or something more in the flaky artesian range. Or if you do a table salt, half the amount, because this is not super salty. Like, I literally eat this straight from the box and I love it. So my Icelandic salt, 1 tablespoon of that. Then you do olive oil, and you're gonna do 2 tablespoons of that. That is 1 and 2. There we go. And that's all you do as extra stuff besides the flour. And of course the starter. Can't forget that. Almost did. Mix that up. Then you take your beautiful starter, which has been sitting there, growing just a little bit while we waited. Mix that up again. And you do about a cup. I usually don't feel like measuring it out just because I don't feel like cleaning yet another container. So I'm just gonna pour about a cup worth of the starter in here, and that looks about right-ish. So you can see you still have like yay much. I've even gone down to here if it's fed too much and the liquid line was bigger than what I had before. I've gone as far as just the bottom full. So that's okay if you do that. It's not gonna hurt the starter. Then you gotta feed the starter. So I'm gonna mix this up just a little bit in here. Let that become kind of a uniform mixture. And then take care of our starter before we do anything else. And you can finish the dough if you want to. It doesn't matter in what order you do it. But the starter takes a cup of water and a cup of flour. So measure out your cup of flour. It doesn't have to be totally accurate, just approximation is fine. Put that in there. And then where did my water go? It disappeared. Where are you, water? Oh, it's in the microwave. There we go. Warm water again, 1 cup. And we're gonna dump it into the sourdough starter. And then just give that a bit of a mixture. And then if you wanna make more tomorrow, I would leave this out on your table, just at room temperature, and it's gonna kind of get ready faster. But if you're like me and you don't either bake or make pizza dough more than like once a week, then you can, at this point, after you get all the gooiness here mixed up in with it, just stick it back in your fridge. And it's gonna just slow down whatever reaction happens in the time between you baking and it eating the flour and water that you gave it. There you go. So you don't have to like totally mix it up. It can be kind of chunky monkey. It's fine. And then I don't ever close the lid. I just leave kind of like a hairline end on there. It's just closed on one side. And then you just put that back in your refrigerator and go from there. So, rinse off my hands. Now we are going to add the flour. So just make sure that this is kind of uniformly mixed in here before you do the flour, so you don't have chunkies of the sourdough starter in there before you start. And the flour depends on how much sourdough starter you put in there, kind of the humidity that you're working with at that point, but I start off with approximately 3 cups, not quite. So I've got a full 1 cup here, and then add another one, kind of a heaping one, and I'm just gonna kind of see where that takes me. And you just mix it up with the spatula. That looks pretty wet to me still. So I'm gonna put maybe 3/4-ish in there and see where that takes me. So what you're looking for is getting rid of those pockets of really wet stuff and have it kind of gooey. And once it gets gooey, we're gonna finish it off on the table. So this is getting together nicely. It's still kind of wet right there, but you can see it's starting to not completely stick to the sides. And then we're gonna finish it up on the table. So another 1/2 cup-ish of flour, just dump that on there. And then you're gonna probably take your jewelry off. That would be a smart thing to do. There we go. Put that off to the side so you don't end up with stuff in your dough that you don't want to eat. Put that there. Get a little nice flour blanket for your dough, and then we scoop that out. Whoa. It's still really wet, but we'll fix that. And now my favorite part, which is kind of therapeutic, get your hands in there, get a little bit more flour on the top. Otherwise, initially your hands will literally just stick to it, and then you're gonna wanna wash it again for them. So I just kind of get it dry with flour. And at this point, I don't have any gooey parts anywhere, and I'm gonna use this part of my hand and kind of just press in and then fold it together. So I'm using my fingers to fold it in and then kneading it with the back of my hand. And you're looking for dough that's elastic, not wet and not dry, but just right. And the more you do it, the better you get at kind of figuring out where that point is. But we're just going to incorporate most of that flour in there. Most of the times I can kind of guess how much I need, and then I'll kind of work all of that in there. And if I overdid the amount of flour that I put on the table, I'll just leave it out. You don't have to put all of it in there if you don't want to. Or if you don't need it, that is. So it's getting there. And we're going to be repeating this process at least once, minimum. But sometimes when I have a lot of time, I'll do it twice. But you're going to have the dough rest in between and then come back to it and just play with it. And that kind of builds up the gluten in the dough and makes it a much nicer texture when you're making your pizza later on. So you can see how it's changed from kind of a bubbly mess to more of a uniform. See how the dough is a nice consistency. It's still kind of wet, which is fine because we're going to be adding more to it the next time around when we come back to it. So you don't want it to be super dry. Still want to have a little bit of that gooiness in there so that you can add just a teeny little bit of flour next time around. So that's about where I would bring it to at this point. You can see it's fairly uniform. It's stretchy, but not as stretchy as it will get when we do this again. So this is the point where you're gonna make it rest. You can either get a clean bowl or just use the one that we had the dough in and pop it in there. And then you want to cover it. You can either put a wet towel on it, or if you have a lidded bowl like this, I will put that on there, but not close it all the way. It's like with the starter, just keep a little hairline air pull in there, and you can see right now it's about halfway up on the bowl, but it will literally like go all the way up to the lid, and we'll knock it down and do it again. Okay, it's been about an hour and a half or so, and usually I let it rise all the way up to the top of the lid, but since my son is going on a Zoom meeting, we are going to just do it a little prematurely. You put a bit of flour on the top. This is literally just so that it doesn't stick as much to your hand. And then you just kind of pet it to the edges, getting all that dough back in there. So that's, I guess it's called knocking the dough down, so that you can get all those bubbles back into the dough. And then I usually put a little bit on the table, and then you're just going to dump that whole thing out, just like we did before. There we go. And it's going to be a little bit drier than it was, just because we added all that extra flour in there. And I would guess that's about, I don't know, half a cup of flour. And we're going to do the same exact motions that we did before, kneading it with that part of the hand, bringing all the dough back with your fingers in the front. And you're looking for getting the dough, see how much more elastic it is right now? Because it didn't do this before. This is called a veil, I think. So you could technically make a bread if you do this. It looks uglier on the bottom side, but you're just going to knead it all together. There we go. It's coming together nicely. And at this point, I don't think I'm going to take all of that flour and add it in there. I'm going to leave some of it out because it's getting pretty dry. so I don't need to incorporate more into it than I need. And you see it's not sticking as much to the table as it did before.
I'm back. I'm back.
There we go. See how beautiful that is? And we're gonna get this one to sit and rest, just like we did before. So that's gonna go back into the bowl right there. And we're gonna put the lid on, and then we're gonna take another break and rinse and repeat. So I'll see you in a minute. All right, and we're back. And look at this. Wow. I think it's been an hour, something like that. See, all the way up to the top. So get that off. And I think I'm gonna leave this as my last knock it down and mix it up. So I'm gonna just take the Crispies out of this flour, because otherwise you're gonna end up with some hard bits in your dough. This seems to be pretty good. And again, you need a little bit of flour just so that your hands don't super stick to it. And it's, I don't know, it's probably 1/3 bigger than it was the first time around. And the next time you do this, if you do decide to have it rice a third time, which it just gets better the more you rice it, or the more you rice it, doesn't make any sense. The more you have it rice, then it just gets more elastic. Makes for a better dough. But after we do this, I'm gonna put it in the fridge, and I'm gonna have it, I'm gonna have it rice one more time and then put it in the fridge. Get this out on the table, and then we'll do the same thing. Just knead it up. But you can keep this, because this is enough for 4 pizzas. So usually I only make like 1 or 2 at a time. And then the other balls, or the ball of dough that you keep in the fridge, you can keep it for, I don't know, it's usually like 3 or 4 days for me. It gets really, really nice after 2 days. It's just easier to spread it out, make it into a pizza bottom, and it just tastes better. I don't know why, but it does. It's still fine if you bake a pizza the same day. It's just better if it's older. Kind of like wine, maybe. So see, much more elastic than it was before. And if you do the little veil thingamajiggy, if you want to make a bread out of this, this is what you would do. And bake it like that. But it's beautiful. Gorgeous dough. There we go. Just gonna get a little bit more flour onto it. Close up that hole that I made on the bottom. And right now, I actually do have time to do this a third time, but it's the same exact thing that we did before, so I don't think I need to make an extra video of that, because it's just exactly what we did this time around. You would just knead it again. But yeah, if you want to cut it up, so let's pretend that this has been sitting and it has risen. What I do, I cut it like this, and I'll cut this one in half again, and then that one in half. So this will actually be the amount that I use for 1 pizza. It's just a handful. And it will spread out to a thin crust pizza, just about yay big. And then you put whatever toppings you want. Maybe I'll do another video with that, so that you can see the pizza making process that we do. But they are yummy. And besides you waiting for them to rise, it's really not that big of an effort. But yeah, I'm gonna just put those back in here, and they will also kind of go together and rise again. But that's it. got your pretty little dough in there. And then you can just close that up, put it in the fridge, or let it rise. When I put it in the fridge, I close it all the way up so that it doesn't have any dried spot on it. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna put it in the fridge and then make a pizza, maybe tonight or maybe tomorrow. But that's it. If you have any questions, put them in a comment or whatnot, and I will try to answer them. But that's it. It's my sourdough pizza making skills.